Okay, welcome to Wire. No, this isn't Wire Wednesday. I'm getting all my days mixed up. This is Twin Blocks Part 4, live recording of for patrons only. Uh, for those that don't know what's going on, you just tuned in. Every week I try to do one or two or possibly three live recordings of the videos that I produce on YouTube. So as patrons, you get first dibs to watch it as I record and to interact with. Um, the, Keep that thought. I just remembered I gotta pull up the chat in case you get in there and you want to chat. So if you're in your Patreon app, I believe you can hit the YouTube screen or something and open it up in YouTube. You can chat with me there, or I'll check back with the Patreon text to see if anybody's in there. Hang with me while I turn this on. A little bit slow. The browser's trying to save my live stream key as a username and password. That's unusual. Okay, I got it up. So, this is part 4 of the Twin Blocks series. Possibly the final part. I'm going to try to finish it up today, depending on how long the live stream can last, how long my batteries can last on all my wireless cameras, and things like that. So, part 1, we covered what Twin Blocks are, what they look like, and then we prepped the models, and then we articulated it. Step 2 is we bent the upper wires and sprinkled it. Part 3, we trimmed and pumice and hot shined the upper to get it ready to make the lower. So part 4, we're going to bend the wires for the lower and sprinkle it and try to trim and polish it and finish up this thing today. So with that being said, let's go ahead and get started. So this is my, whoa, keep that there. And get this in the screenshot here. All right. So like I said, we've set the screw in the upper. We sprinkled it. We waxed up borders so that it will help when we sprinkle it. When I say sprinkle it, I mean add acrylic. And so now we got to get ready for the lower. I've already prepped for the clasp, and again, this doctor just likes finger clasp and just in these kind of 4 corners here. So we'll bend that real quick, and then we'll wax this up and get it ready for acrylic. So I'm going to use 030 wire. And this just barely goes down. We just removed just a slight bit of gums there. Mark this. I'm going to put a little curve in there. And bend it over the occlusion. I'm going to bend this up so I can fit it down in there because I got all this to deal with back here. Now if we were putting an expander, if your doctor asks for expander, you're going to have to figure out if some doctors will just want Adams clasp on these bicuspids and or D's. So you know, you got to bend your clasp in accordance with if there's going to be an expander right in the middle, because you'll bend these right in the way. Alright. So this should go pretty quickly. I say that and then watch it jack up on me. Like I always said, live is a whole different animal. Let me curve this a bit. That's one good thing about these finger clasps is they're very low profile. They'll slip under the gums pretty easily. I believe I did a live recording of these finger clasps in your Patreon feed. So if you want to learn more about them, they're alternative to ball clasp. The doctor I use stopped liking ball clasp because they tended to impinge the gums too much. So he just said, take the ball off. Make me some finger clasp. I keep saying finger spring. We all know what finger springs are. Let me bend this up. See if I can get a better shot here for you. Get my hairy arm out of the way. Alright. I like doing these bend ups right here. Upticks, just to keep the clasp from bending out of the acrylic. So you can actually don't worry about adapting these too much over the occlusion, because you're going to want a little bit of wire or acrylic underneath your wire. That is important for the structure. Alright, now for the posterior clasp. Again, I'm going to not adapt this too far in between the teeth, because I do want acrylic to pass underneath it. There we go. I don't wax these down. I kind of got that a little low. I'm going to bend that up just a tad. Like I was saying, I don't like to wax these down just yet. I want to get them all there. Make sure that they don't interact with each other. Just a little bit of wire management. Round off. If you hear a handpiece working in the background, that's me rounding off the end. Because this end right here, I don't want it to poke them in the gums. You can do it afterwards too. If you remember, just make sure you don't forget. You don't want that to be sharp. And you see, I'm kind of going through this quickly. Since there's going to be posterior acrylic, it doesn't have to be beautiful and exact because it's going to be covered with acrylic. Okay. Alright, I got everything, all the wires where I want them. I'm going to tack them down with some sticky wax now. Then as the sticky wax is setting up, I'm going to pull this out just a little bit. There we go. Get this other posterior in place. Now we're going to add some more wax to this because you got to give the doctor some room to adjust these. They're real tiny, so you got to give them room to adjust these. I've got to adjust this a little bit. I think it's sticking just a little too far out of the acrylic. There we go. Again, I like a little space underneath. You can't really see that very well, but there's a little bit of space underneath. Okay. So I have both chat for the YouTube up and the Patreon feed. So if you have any questions, answer away. I'll try to answer them the best I can. So I'm going to push on this. There we go. Yeah, I like that. Put a little sticky wax. And I'm going to push on it to flare up the lingual side. There. Alright, so we got the wires bent. This is kind of crossing in a weird way. There we go. Let me double check this. Okay. So there is my wires bent. Like I said, didn't take very long. One good thing about Twinblocks is it's not that difficult of appliance if you're pretty fluent in making appliances. If you can bend most any clasp, most any labial bow, and you've done posterior acrylic before and expansions before, you just combine all those into a new appliance called Twinblock, which you have to articulate together. So with that being said, let's get into the acrylic part. Now, with Twinblocks, you build the upper first. And so the upper will be the guide for the lower. You want that 70-degree ramp right there. See if I can get a better angle for you. So you want that 70-degree angle right there. And you want the lower to match that because you want the lower, I can't do protrusive on this very well, but you want the lower block to slide. You can't see my hands. In the watch part 1 I explain it. This is a class 2 patient, the doctor provided a wax bite that put them in class 1 when I mounted it, which is where they want to be. So they will not be able to close down unless they slide their lower jaw forward. So once they slide their lower jaw forward, these angles here will then be your guide. So go ahead and build your top, pumice it, polish it. That will help keep the bottom acrylic from sticking to it. Because the good thing about this acrylic is you can stick new acrylic to the old acrylic. But that's the bad news in this is when you do that, you could fuse them together and just get one big lump sum. Pretty much turns into a bionator. So if you want to separate them out, you need to separate them. Now in part 1, no, I think it was after part 2 or 3, I showed you how to do it with wax. You just put a thin coat of wax on here, make sure you cover all the spots. But the bad thing about that is when you close it, you could knock some of that wax off. It could still stick together. You can also use Vaseline. Vaseline it's okay. You got to make sure you cover these corners real well, because once Vaseline rubs off, it will stick. And you don't want these to stick together and break off a corner, because you want to keep this perfectly square and smooth. Your ramps here, or what I call the ramps. And then another one is tin foil. So you can just take some tin foil and lay here, and that will definitely keep it. But all those create a gap, a space. So you would actually lose just microns of the protrusion. But if you want to maintain all that, I found this stuff from JBC and Company. It's called Part All Parting Solution. And you paint this. This is acrylic to acrylic separator. So it is perfect for twin blocks. You can separate. I use it for repairs too when I don't want acrylic going somewhere I don't want it to go. So I think I paid like 12 bucks for this. This is not very expensive. Good to have it on hand for any time you need to. I believe it's acrylic to plastic separator and vice versa. You're not to use this on 3D printed arches. Just gotta say that. But this thing does good. Now I've already separated this. It says to paint 3 coats on here, or 2 to 3. Apply 2 to 3 coats to support surface. Allow each coat to dry thoroughly before the next application of Part All. Each coat should not be tacky to the touch. Use warm soapy water to wash and rinse Part All from devices. Non-toxic and safe in all applications. So, with that being said, I have already applied 2 coats. Now I did this a few days ago, and I thought maybe, I don't know how long it can stay painted on there, but I thought maybe I better wash it off. And I washed it off with warm soapy water, and it worked perfect. It washed off perfectly. So I've already applied 2 coats. I let it dry in between, and I can see why you don't want to paint a new coat on when it's tacky, because it'll just peel off the first coat. It'll stick together. So first thing I'm going to do is, that's the main part, those ramps. So use a a soft brush, and just make sure you paint it. I even do it on the back side, because I don't want any acrylic to stick to any part of this. And definitely work on your ramps. Make sure you cover those. Alright, I'm going to let that dry while we wax up. That is the final coat of Part All. I have put a link in the description below this video, and you can go check it out on JBC and Company store and order you. It's 12 bucks. You just order you some and have it on hand. And anytime you need to do something fancy like keeping acrylic from sticking to each other, it's perfect for that. I've already done it once, made it once with this stuff, and it worked wonderfully. This doctor wants. I've seen these done different ways. I've seen them where it is just a block right here, and it's just a regular retainer in here. This doctor likes there to be full coverage and wants his uppers to touch the acrylic. So he wants a occlusal coverage all the way around. So I'm using this utility wax to. Now I've already, in the first part, I already drew where we are putting the acrylic. I'm just doing a little bit of acrylic coverage, a little bit of a lip over the incisal edge. As you know, on the upper, whatever part that was, when we were grinding, I think it was part 3, we were grinding down the occlusion. We kept the cusp points in there, cusp tip points, it's hard to say, and that way they can kind of, I don't want to say lock in, but find their bite. It kind of guides in there. Nothing to where it locks out the upper, locks it into place, but remember, they're going to, this doctor has them eat, sleep, and be merry in these appliances. They're going to wear them 24/7, so they got to be very strong to withstand chewing forces and comfortable for the patient at the same time. Okay, with that done, let me clean it up just a tad. Now I am going to let me get a drink of water. I'm going to add a little bit of pink wax. And block out a lot of this because you want it to be able to bend, be adjusted by the doctor. So I'm going to build up a mound of pink wax. That way the acrylic won't get around that clasp. And I'll even do it all the way up to the incisal edge on these anterior springs. Now I know that this wax seems pretty thick, you know, labely. I'll end up trimming that down. I just want to give myself enough wiggle room to really dial this in the trimming. I don't want to have to go back and add acrylic. And if you do, you can use Partol. So what I do on repairs on the Partol is I paint the intaglio surface, or the inside tissue side, and that way when I do repairs, any acrylic that seeps up underneath it won't stick underneath the retainer, and you can just pick it off. Alright, so let me put this back on. There are many people that can sprinkle this by hand without any wax. But if you're starting out, I like using the wax as a crutch. Yes, I know, I'm a weakling, whatever. But I don't like to be rushed with my acrylic. I mean, you're rushing anyway because you got to build this up that high. So it's pretty hard to mess that up, or pretty easy to mess that up. Okay, let me get some pink wax here. Got little shrapnels of it. Well, I can use this. Thought I had some set out. So what you can do is I can cut that in half and get my little knife. I'm going to cut this in half. And I'm going to build a little wall, a little dam to hold the acrylic in while I'm working. So I'm going to cut this in half. You don't need much, just enough. To cover this. So let me loop this to the utility wax and on the inside here. Now you don't, before we did this, we cut a 70-degree angle in the wax as a guide. But since we now have an acrylic guide in this upper, we don't need to cut a 70-degree angle in this lower, because as we sprinkle, we'll be putting this up and down and trying to build up against that upper. Now you don't want to build that too much, you'll rub off your separator, but alright, so there we go. That was perfect. I get this pretty hot to get these two waxes to melt together. They melt at different temperatures. Sometimes I'll have to add a little bit of pink wax to the two halves. Okay, again, oh, you don't want that to happen. So go ahead and wax in just a little bit of sticky wax. Wax in your upper so it doesn't fall off while you're in the middle of sprinkling. Alright, make sure all your, actually, after you've finished the upper, you don't have to worry about your stops here, because now you've got your own built-in stops. This is as far as it goes, as it bites down, because you built an acrylic block there. So we are ready for acrylic. This time I thought ahead and put my stuff in the fridge. I'm grabbing a paper towel. At this point, this is also where you would have put an expander in and got it ready to go, or some like to put them in while they do the acrylic. Get all my tools ready. So I'm going to disconnect this articulator first and bring that in when I think I'm at the correct height. First thing I do is I'm going to put the name in here. So I put a layer of acrylic. I drip a little bit on the name. I make my names in a P-Touch labeler. Oh, that name is upside down. And I just slide it up underneath the wire. So that's actually on the tissue side. So you won't see the name unless you flip it over. And that's just how I do my names. So add a little bit of green. I do the green first, and then build the rest up in clear. So I just get enough green to cover your wires and, you know, to give the appliance some color, but the rest is going to be done with your tinted clear splint acrylic material. I'm going to add a little bit of clear underneath the wire so I can see them when I'm trimming. Little tip. I always put just a little bit of. It all started by putting those names under there. I just noticed it helps to see the, especially when doing a dark color. It's sometimes hard to see those wires, and you may hit them when you're bulk grinding. Let that soak in. Add just a little bit more. Now this isn't going to be a very, there's a version of this, I want to say it's called the McNamara or something like that, where you extend the acrylic all the way back with clasp. So that's an option if your doctor asks for it. I want to say this is Clark style, where there's a smaller in the front. Alright, we're ready for the clear. So let me wet this, make sure I get some monomer underneath those wires. I'm just going to try to build this whole thing at once. See if I can get a better view for you all here. So I've drawn that line on that E, and that tells me how far back I need to sprinkle the acrylic. Sorry if I'm not talking too much, just kind of concentrating on making this even all the way around. So let me see if I can get this to gel up just a bit. I don't want to be too wet when I put the acrylic together. I'm going to change my camera angle since I'm sprinkling to a different one. Hopefully this helps. Alright, let's bring in the upper. And I've got a long way to go. As you can tell. So, keep going. I should have been building this in this tinted clear this whole time. Anyway. Alright, so one thing I need to show you is I still got a long way to go right here. Got to build that. That one doesn't look too bad. This, I didn't go far enough. And when you do this, you kind of need to almost pre-build your little ramp on the lower. There we go. That was nice. So I have plenty of room on the outside to grind it flush. As you can see there. I'm going to seal it. I need to add a little on the lingual. And the upper teeth have embedded into the top right here. If you can't see that, right there. Alright, so put this back down. We lost a little bit in the slumping. There we go. Now I need to add a little bit in here. And you build this up now. I'm just going to lightly dust this to keep it from slumping. This pad on the right side, this ramp. And try to build up this corner a little bit more. Come on. Yeah, that's better. Just need a little bit more on the top. Sometimes you have to dig out. We don't want to build it up too much on the occlusal of the lower, or else it's not going to seat all the way. A good indication of that is if your pin doesn't come all the way down right here. One last little build up. I'm going to close it for good and put it in the pressure pot. Speaking of, turn on the pressure pot. So just, you got to look all the way around. Make sure, I'll see just a little bit right there. So I've got the two front teeth touching. That's about all I can touch. I'm not about to try to build it up to that lateral. That's just overkill. I've got this tooth touching. I've got the pin touching here, which means I didn't stack it on the occlusal too much. And you should start seeing a little square show up right here. A little imprint of a square show up on your lower as you're sprinkling it. Try to keep it wet. This acrylic has a great gel state you can take advantage of, meaning it doesn't dry out on you so quick. Make sure there's no space there. Alright. Yep, one last hurrah. Little monomer. I'm not going to trim out the lingual down here. I'm just going to get this in the pressure pot as soon as possible. So let me prep my pressure pot. Okay. Now, what was asked me in the previous Patreon was, Cade, why didn't you submerge this? Well, I don't want to submerge it and then the bubbles from that's trapped in the stone, it goes through capillary action and it'll bubble up through your acrylic. So right now I'm just going to put it upside down so that if the acrylic does slump, it slumps against the lower, or against the upper. So I have it in there on a little bowl upside down, and that's going to be my preliminary 5 minutes to just set the acrylic hard. Then I'm going to submerge the whole thing in water and let it cure for another 10 minutes. Depending on the thickness of your acrylic, you may want to let it cure longer than you would a normal retainer. Okay, while that's in the pressure pot, I just want to remind everybody that you can go to the Patreon account. The link should be in the description below. And this is where this is being recorded to. And go to, let's see, post and published. And you can see all the other ones. So there's part 1, part 2, and part 3 is a live wire Wednesday. I'll make sure and post it here. So part 3 is on my YouTube channel. I did a live wire Wednesday. Okay, let's check if there's any comments yet. Okay, I don't see any. So what I'm going to do is, oops. What I'm going to do is I'm going to pause this recording in this live stream while that cures in the pressure pot, and that'll give me time to set up my area for trimming and pumicing, and we'll finish up this twin blocks today. So hold off a little bit. I'm going to pause everything. If you're watching this live, make sure you keep the page open or something. Go get a drink, go use the bathroom, go get something to eat, something. So I'll be right back in about 10 to 20 minutes. Okay, we are back live. Let me check, make sure everything is right and all the angles are good. All right. Okay, we are back live. Okay, so the what we just did was we bent the wires, we waxed up to build up like a dam for the acrylic. Then we sprinkled the lower and mashed it against the upper finished twin block. And if you remember, we used part all to help aid in separation between the two acrylic halves, because you just put brand new acrylic against finished acrylic, and 9 times out of 10 they're going to stick together. So this will help separate. That's probably in reverse, but it's part all. Again, I have a link below to if you want to order it. So what I'm going to do now is take it out of the pressure pot, because one of the things it suggests is to aid in separation is to submerge it in water for a few minutes. So I have put it in the water to finish curing, and now I'm going to pull it out of the water and we're going to switch over to trying to separate. We'll see how it does. Hopefully I applied it correctly and it separates cleanly. Otherwise, it's all messed up. So here is my cured twin blocks with the lower sprinkled. So I'll take the upper off. I'm going to attempt to pull the lower off. And that was great separation. Usually what happens is the whole thing comes off together as a whole. But as you can see, let me zoom in a little bit. Oopsie. Hopefully you can see look how smooth that joint is. Sorry, I'm trying to find the center. Alright, look how smooth that joint is. And nothing got broke off here. So I have perfect little squares, and they are smooth to the touch. That was great stuff right there. So let me go ahead and separate this. I can show y'all better. I'm going to go ahead and try to take off as much of this and zoom out a little bit. I have my other cameras set up throughout the lab for this next process, so I only have this overhead cam right now. Man, where is the center of this? Right here. Take off this pink border, pink wax border. Base plate wax, if you're looking for this stuff, pink base plate wax. I suggest getting the all-weather kind. It bends easier. There's some that are brittle and they just break apart. So I think it's all temperature or all season or something like that. Now we are going to there. Hey, and I didn't break any teeth off. Now, I did not use part all on the stone cast. I used this regular pink separator. You just use that. You just use this stuff for the stone. Just use that for stone and plaster. And use this for just acrylic only. And again, not to be used on 3D printed arch models. That is the key. So don't get confused there. Alright, so as you can see, this came apart like a champ. I got perfect little ramps, perfect duplicates of the upper ramps. Zoom in a little bit. So you see how shiny that is and smooth? I think that's going to turn out really good. Alright, so let's go to the bulk trimmer. Well, actually, I'm going to make a stop off at the steamer. I'm going to get rid of all this wax. I'm done with the wax. And we'll see how it turns out. Okay, I apologize for the noise on that. But we are ready to bulk trim this. Turn on my suction here. Shed a little more light on the subject here. So I took out, there's a little ramp right here, and I just took it out because I want it to go straight down. Little flare out. So let me get my pencil again. Steaming took it off, but I like to mark, and this separator did such a wonderful job. I actually can't mark on it because it's so darn smooth. Usually I don't get this. Now I wish I would have built up a little bit of corner here. Maybe I will later. I don't think I will. I think once I trim it and get it all. So I do not want to touch in this area or this area. So those marks help me mark my border. I'm just going to go right to the edge. I'm going to leave the mark for right now. I'll probably end up taking it off. But I do want to thin this down. So again, you can mark it. It's hard to see. Make sure, depending on where the teeth sit, they could be sitting way out here, and depending on if the doctor wants to include those in the acrylic, the upper teeth occluding against the lower acrylic, you'd be careful trimming of the front side of this. So just trim it to the top of that line. Again, I'm trying to make it a nice square. I'm trying to make it actually look like blocks. And again, I'm going to take off a little bit of this occlusion right here. These indentions from the upper teeth. I want to leave just a little bit so that the patient can find it again. But not too much that if the doctor wants to put brackets on, that it traps the upper teeth. So I'm going to flatten this. Now this is where some of these designs you would just dip down and just leave this block. Let me draw it. You would actually just leave like a block like this. Leave that and all this would be gone. But this doctor wants the occlusal coverage. Alright, so again, everything is just kind of keying off those ramps and making sure that we can maintain them. So it's always good to check back with the articulated version of this. Put this right back on here. Put this back on here. Alright, my pin is raised a little bit, so that means something's not seating all the way. So, I don't have my pencil here, but I'm going to mark this here and here. And so that's going to tell me that I can take all this off. I can thin it down some more as long as I don't get to that line. Because I want this to be flush to the touch. Just the transition going from one to another. So that means I can take off a lot of this stuff. I can go ahead and mark this just to help with being able to see it. I could probably mark this. See, I use my pencils a lot. And I know where those are, but I didn't know where the laterals were since they were not in the acrylic. So check the inside. I want it to be smooth on the inside too. Looks like we're pretty good. I won't mess with that too much. Make sure it's not too low where it bothers the patient. Probably take a little bit off the lower. Alright. Back to the trimmer. Okay, so this... Let me get this smoothed out. Always check underneath that you're not going to open up one of these, that you're going to have coverage on the buckle a little bit. Round this a little bit more. Alright, we're going to use a lathe burr. I can figure out where I put it. Oh, there we go. Okay, so to answer a question JV, one of the patrons, had, is to explain the difference between a lathe. Now this is a lathe wheel from Kratex. I think that Dymaco makes one, and I just have a quick chuck changer on here, which means I can change this while the unit is running. And so you can get burrs, and in fact, you can even put small burrs in here. So you could finish a whole retainer on one of these lathes. But I also use this for pumicing, so I have a pumice over here. I need to clean that up there. I don't ever see it because I'm sitting, and I see it. So I pumice here, and then I have a rag wheel that I put polish on that goes in here. So that is what I use to bulk trim. This takes it off really quick. You can bulk trim retainers or whatever, and it just you can get the borders of the retainer done very quick. It's nice to have that kind of speed. So let me switch to my other handpiece and explain that to you. Oops. Alright, I'm in my dust box right here, and this is a handpiece, electric handpiece. I have a foot pedal below that I can control. Oh, if I turn it on, that would help out a lot. So I can control the speed. I can go slow, fast, slow, fast. So I can control it with my foot like a gas pedal on a car. So let me switch to the overhead cam real quick. This is where we're at. I got a little bit of dialing in. I want to tuck this curve in a little bit, tuck that in. Now I can't decide if I want that to raise up and touch that tooth or not. I don't think it's that important since it's covered anyway. But the important thing is make sure this is smooth and this is smooth, and that you have your ramps. Alright, so I'm going to take this whole thing into the trimmer. This is where you dial in your trimming. Make sure it's thick, nice and thick. So I said before that I want to curve this over a little bit. Again, I'm not ever touching this ramp, because the more you touch it, the more chance you have of shortening this. And you don't want this side to be touching this side not. You can shift the jaw in an undesirable way, because the patient's mouth will try to find, I don't know how do you say it, neutrality. And so if you're short on one side or another on this, it'll rotate to try to, and then their midline will be off. So I need to take off that a little bit right there. And this is a lot of just, especially when you don't do these very often, you'll find yourself grinding on them a lot, putting them back on the model and checking. There we go. Now, I don't know if you can tell, but there's just the slightest little lip where it's smooth, but then it just a slight little lip. I'm going to just take off that lip. That way these ramps can go side to side also. I don't want to keep them, so as they chew, they can go up and down and side to side. So I feel a slight little ramp there. Again, I'm not touching, I wish I could show you. I'm not touching that smooth surface there. I worked very hard with that acrylic separator to maintain that, and I don't want to lose it. Alright. So as they bite down, they have to slide their jaw forward to be able to bite down all the way to a comfortable position. I mean, it's going to be uncomfortable because we're retraining. So that's where that ramp comes in handy. Is that action right there. This has a little ramp up. I'm going to level it out. Okay, I don't know where I left off my unit. My recording unit just suddenly reset out of nowhere, so I had to reconnect all my cameras up. So, and they're running out of battery, so I gotta hurry this up. Anyway, I'm almost done. I just need to clean up a few things. Again, I'm trying to make it smooth across here. This needs a little bit more work. And then I need to clean up my border here, make it nice and even. I'm going to use my wire brush here. I'm actually going to dig out a little bit so that the doctor can get in there and adjust those a little bit easier. Nope, sorry. There we go. Had to get one of my phones on the charger real quick, or else I was losing power. So I make like a little triangular notch here. This is going to be what everybody sees, so I kind of want to make it look nice and even. Again, I still have my shiny areas on my ramp. Now I'm just going to sandpaper this, blend in all the little angles together. This will make pumicing so much easier. And be careful. I don't want to. The sandpaper will take off acrylic really fast. So, again, see how those are still shiny? I want to keep those shiny. Those are the exact area that's touching the upper. So, I'm trying to make this the same thickness, so it doesn't feel lopsided in the mouth. And then we'll do there we go. Check the inside here. I think we're good. Make sure there's no places to pinch. I mean, it's going to pinch the tongue, but there we go. So it is ready to pumice now. I'm going to, oh, while we're at it, let's split this. Again, try to get a new, don't fall. There we go. Try to get a brand new one if I can. And I just like to lay Get it right in the center. So remember in another part, I said don't split it yet, because just in case you get acrylic in there, then you just have to split it all over again. And some people play it safe and they'll actually wax that out before they sprinkle the lower. Alright, let's take this easy. Now why I laid it down like that was just to give myself a guide. It's easier to find my straight mark this way than this way. And it starts getting thick right about here, so just take your time. You can also use a saw if you want to do this, or a disc. I just tend to like using these cutting burrs. So I just look down the side, make sure there are no acrylic left over. I can see all white, which means I have ground into the tab, the little acrylic tab that holds that screw in place. And now I'm ready to expand this. We'll open this up. And we're going to open it up enough to get that bottom part of that tab out, the superior portion of that white tab. Now remember, the top one just came right out. They just kind of interlock with each other, but the top one, due to the thickness of the acrylic, is a little hard to get out. So open it up. Now's your chance to smooth the inside really easy. If you have one of those burrs, see if I can find it real quick. Oh, there we go. Over here. I like these because they can smooth the inside pretty good. Alright, so now, close this back. Let me steam clean this. Okay, so wash this out. Before you close it, they'll get rid of any particles that are in there. This also is good. It tests the screw. Make sure it works. Now one time I forgot to close this, and the doctor sent it back saying it doesn't fit. And I realized, oh no, I opened it and forgot to close it. So always remember to close it back. Okay, one last fit. Looks good. Oh, I think I could take off a little bit here. My line looks decent. Alright, so I'm going to pumice this and this together. One final pumice and polish. And again, I'll talk about it in a second. One thing to watch out for. Sorry for the camera shaking. Trying to get a good angle for y'all. Alright, I got my pumice in here. Get my wheel. Now, one thing I wanted to warn y'all with was you do not want to touch this. I mean, just barely touch it with the pumice wheel. Again, the pumice wheel will take off more acrylic than you think, and then you'll have a space. So I usually do it last. I get all the other surfaces pumiced. Now, this is another reason I round off those points on those wires, is you can really jab yourself here. So make sure all that's smooth. Okay, now if you remember, we did trim a little bit on the edges here. So I'm going to pumice just ever so lightly and mainly concentrate on the edges of this little ramp. I don't want to pumice the actual ramp itself. Remember, it's still shiny from the first time, from, you know, just being able to sprinkle it against an already shiny upper ramp, and we have great separating medium. It transferred the shiny, so you don't have to pumice and polish. That's one of the bad things about twin blocks, is if you can't transfer a good shiny to the ramp, it's very hard to pumice and polish it without losing a lot of material, and therefore creating a gap between the twin blocks, and you lose some of your protrusive movements. So let me pumice this upper real quick, especially along that line, that upper expander acrylic cut I just did. And I'll remove some of that separating medium we had on there. Like I said before, earlier in this film, you want to remove it with soap and water. Remember, I painted the inside. I don't see any acrylic that's stuck there. So, alright, let me rinse these. I'm using soap and water if you can't hear that, or you can't really see it. I was using soap and water to remove that part all from the inside of the retainer of the twin block. Pumice probably got rid of the other stuff and off of the ramps. Okay, let's high shine this. You like my bubble wrap? It's a splash guard, and it also helps when to fling the retainer out. Hopefully, you know, polishing is polishing on these. You can polish those ramps all you want. The polish won't take off any of the acrylic. Get a little Fabuluster. Get a little light on the subject here. Oh, that didn't pumice set very well. And make sure you get the pumice off of this. Woo! Wash my hands real quick. Stupid fly. Alright. Now, I'm letting those set up, swim in the ultrasonic for a little bit, clean up, and then we'll look at these final products and kind of judge them, see how they turned out. I'm getting all the other cameras set up here. Okay, we are finished. This was an epic 2-hour live stream, and my live stream quit on me hour and a half into it, which is kind of scary. I don't know why it did that. It's supposed to last at least 3 hours. I don't know if it was because all my batteries are about to die, or something got nudged or bumped or something. It died. So during the trimming, we lost a little bit of the recording, but it was pretty basic and standard. What I was trying to get across. I am hooking up the overhead camera. I had to charge that. This was a good learning experience because I've found out it does not last that long. Oh, that is my overhead camera. It is on. I just lost this one. Alright, I can't get another camera working, so Let me go get those retainers. Okay, here it is. After all that hard work, we have ourselves one official set of twin blocks. Again, this is a unique version, or they're all a little bit different. That's what makes twin blocks great. Every doctor can custom make these and make them look however they want. You know, you can just basic skills, retainer skills that you have probably already learned. Bend wire, sprinkle acrylic, trim acrylic. You can make a set of these. You know, you may need to practice with posterior occlusal coverage, but we've gone over the trick to get these two pads to interact with each other so that you can, oh, let me pull this up. So you can see they guide along each other. And so that is where the twin block name comes from. You have 2 blocks up here, 2 blocks down here, and they are twins of each other. Now, if you can see my lower, I have tiny little air bubbles in there, which means I didn't get in the pressure pot fast enough. And you can see lines in here. Now, there's a couple reasons for this. One, this is a very tall occlusal coverage, as you can tell. I mean, there is a lot of space in there. If I take this out, you can see that there's a huge gap we had to fill. One reason, and I don't want to make excuses, is I'm talking while I'm doing this, which takes longer when I'm sprinkling, and you don't even realize it until you're done with it. So I hate to see these small little bubbles. So if you're doing it yourself, you know, make sure you don't take your time, but just kind of hurry up and get it layered. And building up the wax wall that we did, it should have gone a lot quicker. That being said, make sure another option is to do the green inside first, put it in a pressure pot, bring it back out, and then sprinkle, let it cool your model, because if your model's warm, it'll make these set up faster. And then come back and sprinkle your pads later. And so if you're new at this, you're doing it for the first time, you may want to do that. Sprinkle the retainer part like you would a regular retainer, and you can, you know, do your screw and all that, and then come back and do your posterior occlusal coverage, and that way you may not get these little air bubbles in here. I just did that from usually I'll sprinkle and pat it down, and that would help get rid of some of those bubbles too, but I was trying to talk and sprinkle at the same time. So anyway, these are very functional twin blocks. I think that they will do their job very well, and they're going to get nasty anyway because the kid's going to eat in them and stuff. So that's it. I hope that helps. This has been a marathon 2-hour live stream, live recording. I hope you patrons get some tip out of it that helps you. It didn't go 100% like I want it to, but we did get some functional twin blocks out of it. So pay attention. I'll edit a lot of this together, probably into 5 parts, make it a little more easier to digest, and that way you can rewatch these parts if you need to, and only watch the parts that you need help with. Again, if you have any questions, ask them below in the comments. If you have any tips or tricks, put them in the comments below. I'm looking for tips and tricks myself. I don't have the corner of the market on these Twinblocks. So put a comment below if you have any questions. If you're watching the YouTube version of this, thank you for watching. I hope it helped. And I hope that, I don't know what I was going to say here. The full unedited live recording of this is found on Patreon. So if you are a Patreon subscriber, make sure you log in. You can see the full live unedited version, all my mistakes that I edited out of this video. And it's a little long, but you know, if you got some time, you might get some tricks or tips out of it that help you. Until then, I hope you have a good time and happy wire bending.